We're live. Hi, Clayton. Welcome to Venture with Grace.
Hey, Grace, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
Okay, so wanna give our mutual friend Michael a quick shout out. So everybody, if you're using any meeting notes taking app, I highly recommend you check out Quill. It's amazing. Anyway, so it's a quick shout out.
I second
So
that. They're
okay.
great.
Amazing. Okay, so I want to start with, and before you join 500 Global, I want to maybe like we can chat a little bit about your journey, as an operator, as a head of community, and a venturepreneur of like Dorm Room Fund. Later on, now you're like a partner at 500 Global. You're leading the global accelerator fund. And why don't we start with like, maybe give the audience a little bit of your like core lessons that you've learned in your early on journey that you kind of took to investing and being a partner here at 500?
Sure. I mean, where to start? So I guess I'll start by saying, I kind of grew up as a kid that was into science fiction. I was
Mhm,
fortunate enough to have an old Mac 2 back in the day.
mhm,
Remember things like Oregon Trail and Mavis Speak and Teach Us Typing. That was kind of like my gateway, I guess, application into
mhm,
wanting to learn more about um, just applications and technology writ large. And in high school, I actually studied computer programming, learned Pascal, C++.
mhm,
I took APCS, learned that I probably didn't want to be a developer
mhm,
full time, but I still had a strong appreciation for developers and just technologists in general. But the other kind of thing in high school that I fell in love with was history. And so, kind of on one side, I was really into technology, everything from like Star Trek, Star Wars,
mhm,
obviously things like video games, and then getting into uh, coding. But then
mhm,
also, I had a really big appreciation for things like history and like learning about. Um, so that started with uh, world history and things like that. But then it quickly kind of morphed into like history of companies.
mhm,
And Fortunate that I'm located here in Silicon Valley, and so I was able to study some really interesting companies even in high school, and as I started college. Which were pretty big foundations to kind of where I'm at today and what I'm doing as an investor. But I was very fortunate to at college or during college get an internship at Yahoo, kind of when they were still doing pretty well as a business. So before Google had completely kind of taken over the, I mean, pretty much the homepage business, if you will. At that time, Yahoo had a great bench of managers, folks like Dan Rosenswag and Jeff Weiner, who went on to do fantastic things. I kind of got my first foray into tech was at a big tech company. But going back to what I was saying about the appreciation of history, like just understanding the fact that Yahoo had a historic run as a big tech company before handing the baton off to several other companies here in Silicon Valley, most notably Google. But I was very just fascinated by kind of being in this place in that time, being in Silicon Valley, and really eating it all up. Again, I wasn't so when I joined Yahoo, I was more so I was on a search team, but we were not technical, so we were helping to revise some aspects of the search engine result page. At that time, Yahoo had kind of so folks may not remember this. Again, another bit of a history lesson, but Yahoo was leaning on Google for their search engine at that time. Yahoo basically just had, kind of their yahoo.com main homepage, which was at that time one of the most visited pages online. But the search engine function on that page was Google and kind of the tail end. Yahoo decided they wanted to do something about that, so they kind of bought they bought three smaller search engines, coupled them together, and that was going to be the Yahoo search engine. And so I was on the side of I was a part of that team to kind of help make sense of those search engine results as they were outputted to the consumers. And so I was able to kind of from that experience, I learned what acquisitions could look like. Not everybody's going to make it public sometimes. And again, I wasn't on the team that got acquired, but I was on the other side of that at Yahoo.
Mhm,
But and that's important because today in my seat where I'm kind of coaching um, early stage companies, typically at the pre-seed and the seed, telling them like, hey,
mhm,
it's great to go IPO, but many of you like, the highest yeah, kind of success will be that acquisition. And that
mhm,
could still be a really meaningful acquisition, and you can go on and do great things. And so that was one thing that I saw early in my career. But sorry, to get back to the original question, um, I'm kind of fortunate to be, from Silicon Valley, coming up in this
mhm,
time where, really saw some amazing companies at the back part of the 2000s as I started my professional career. And so that gave me some lessons in terms of what the outcome could look like.
mhm.
So yeah.
Amazing. I feel like that's such a interesting point to think about acquisition, to think about like, what are the access or asset you can leverage as a company, like learning that lesson early on is like super helpful. Um, I wanna talk about community building because I feel like, um, you have spent time before you spend time in, like, corporate development or, like, like, as a partner at Dorm Room Fund, I feel like you were doing a lot of, like, community building as a head of community at different companies. What have you kind of learned in the community side that you kind of took to 500 Global today? Since I feel like it's such a community-driven platform.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think, one of the things that I've taken from that experience, and I think it's kind of hard to quantify, is that communities can be a really strong moat.
Mhm,
And that, again, going back to kind of my affinity with history,
mhm,
some of the earliest success stories, within software businesses, are around companies that have had really strong communities.
mhm,
I'm even thinking about like kind of like back in the day, you had the Mac fanboys and you had the
mhm,
Windows folks, and that more or less was just those communities and those developer communities being very kind of devout believers in like their
mhm,
platforms. And you see echoes of that, with certain open source companies, open source frameworks, where
mhm,
they're building these developer communities for the betterment of the underlying technology or for the applications that the
mhm,
consumers will eventually get to play with. So I think like community building is very, very important. I think it's one of the things that kind of often gets swept under the rug, if you will,
mhm,
because it's not as quantifiable as some of the other
mhm,
strategies that you can spin up. But
mhm,
I think you look at amazing companies such as Reddit that are, it's like all
mhm,
community, right? And
mhm,
so some of the lessons that I've taken are just, one, how can I get founders to think about community strategies as maybe not necessarily their primary moat, but like something that could be additive to some of the other moats that they might be thinking about. But even the things that I'm doing, like kind of as a within the firm infrastructure around how are we strengthening the community of founders and the community of
mhm,
mentors that we are working with on a weekly, daily basis here at 500. Like
mhm.
that's also important, or the other portfolio companies that are coming from different parts of the world here at 500. And so like I think it's important for every company that um, has that deals with either smaller businesses
Mhm,
or end consumers to think about community emotions that they can incorporate to increase, at the end of the day, their margins, and so decrease things like churn, increase things like kind of ACV or ARPU. I think what you'll see is like the companies that have the strongest communities are tending to be able to lean into their customers for added value.
I wonder I really like what you just said, like, about, like, community is, like, at the backbone of, like, a lot of these businesses such as Reddit or, like, nowadays, like, the open source software companies, and I wonder but it's, a kind of, like, a really hard to quantify. I wonder what's your thought process on, like, instead of, like, quantifying it, but, like, how do you kind of demonstrate the importance of community to a company? And then obviously we're gonna dive into 500 Global in like a short bit.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think like you want to like a thriving community can help
Mhm.
across the board. So I hit on a couple of things. Thriving community can help with kind of doing some low level, let's say, customer service.
Yeah,
And
I have a quick question about that. So, like, I feel like the part of the community turn into quantitative product. It's kind of like, do you sell directly to your community members? Since, like, I feel like a lot of the open source companies are mentioning, like, there's like only maybe like a 2% conversion rate or something among the community member turn into like a power user slash like a whale to the company. I wonder, how do you kind of evaluate, like, how do you kind of like um leverage the community to potentially monetize or like developing a better product? And um when do you sell product to the community versus like you just nurture the community and like the sales kind of like organically happen, that kind of stuff?
Well, yeah, I mean, so every community is different, and so
Mhm,
it kind of would be kind of a case by case, but I think what's important is to try and to prioritize like what are the main
mhm,
kind of expectations. What are the kind of the main what's I think it is fair to look at a community and expect there to be some form of ROI, right? And so
mhm,
sometimes that might mean like direct revenue
mhm,
kind of relationship in terms of like maybe you're going to start to sell to that community, but sometimes that
mhm,
community might be playing really significant roles in terms of like maybe they're helping to ship new versions, or they're kind of policing certain code bases, like so there's certain things which are kind of cost reducing
mhm,
for whatever that kind of parent entity might be. So I think that there's other things that may not necessarily, maybe I'm not trying to optimize revenue within my community, but maybe this community is helping me to reduce costs, which is also something that's valuable. Or maybe they're helping me to promote this into new circles, get this into other developers' hands, so that my core technology is spreading throughout the internet, and the awareness is building. So I don't know necessarily if on the topic of quantifying kind of
mhm,
expectations from these
mhm,
communities. Revenue definitely could be a part of that mix, but it's not always what the owners of that community, or the owners of that product where that community is serving, are
mhm.
looking to always optimize for.
Totally. I wanna dive into 500 Global. I feel like
Let's
500
do it.
Global is like definitely one of the most iconic programs coming out of Silicon Valley. It is like a 4-month program, and then you guys provide investment and a lot of like these extra resources to help the founders. Why don't we start with like what it is, and then like for the founders, what do you get out of it? And like as investors, what do you get out of it? And then yeah, we could dive into other topics later. I'm very like, sometimes I have, like, so many questions in my head, but anyways.
Yeah, we'll note them down. Use Quill to note them down so we can get
Yeah,
back to some of
exactly.
the questions I may not get to. But so 500, we just celebrated our 14th birthday.
Mhm,
So we've been around since 2010. Currently, we have 2.3 billion in assets under management.
mhm,
We have about 3,000 companies in our portfolio. We have 35 companies in the portfolio that are valued over $1 billion. So in the
mhm,
unicorn kind of realm. And so when 500 got started, some folks don't realize this, but we were just a traditional seed stage investment firm. We actually added the accelerator as a differentiator. And today,
mhm,
there's hundreds, if not thousands, of accelerators, which I think is a signal that the model of an accelerator is working. And so I look at what we do as we serve founders. So we have a product, our accelerator, that is an experience for pre-seed and seed stage founders. It's a 4-month long program. We do it twice per year. We are small batch, so we like to have batches that are anywhere between 20 to maybe 35 companies large. We find that to be more effective for our style of play, if you will. We really do want to invest a lot of time with our founders, and it's hard to scale one-to-one interactions. And so we have through that 4 months program, we um, uh, divided into thirds. And so we look at the first third of
Mhm.
that program where we work alongside the founders to critically attack their key assumptions about their market, about their product, about their buyer, most likely their buyer.
Mhm.
And we go through a lot of work in terms of customer discovery and interviewing to figure out if they're really indeed on that right trail. Once
Mhm.
we have received the right, enough signal that they're on the right trail as it relates to ICP,
Mhm.
we then help them think through growth experiments. And so
Mhm.
we want to help them 10x one or multiple of their metrics that matter as it relates to things that will get them close to revenue. It may not always be
Mhm.
10xing revenue. It might be things like, well, waiting list or design partners, things of that nature. But kind of that middle third of the program is, we've gone from the first part where we've critically kind of dissected and put back together some core elements of the business model, maybe even some of the unit economics, helping them think through that. And then that middle part, we're now putting some rocket fuel into the machinery to help them try to figure out a way to 10x one or multiple of those metrics on that new ICP. And then the last area of the program is really around the kind of the art and the science of telling an effective narrative to investors. So we do a lot of work on pitch prep. We do a lot of work on fundraising strategy, making sure that the founders are out there talking to the right firms and thinking about what types of angels they should go after, the types of investors they should go after, how they should think about valuation. But also in that last third, we work on some key fundamentals like things like just corporate finance 101, because we realize we have a lot of fantastically brilliant founders. We like to use the term globally ambitious company
Mhm.
builders. So we have a
Mhm.
lot of globally ambitious company builders, but in previous lives, maybe they've just been a product manager, or maybe they've been a head of eng or a CTO. But managing the entirety of an operation might be new to them, and so we
Mhm.
want to make sure that they have like the some fundamental just corporate finance literacy kind of at the tail end of the program. And then we our capstone is our demo day, and we typically have anywhere between 300 to 500 investors at demo day in person, and maybe another 300 to 500 that are streaming. And we saw you at our last demo day, so thank you for showing up. That was great. But kind of to tie a bow on it, we really see our program, our offering um, as a bespoke experience for highly ambitious, globally ambitious company builders that know that realize that they need some guidance, some assistance, and some additional resources to get to their
Mhm.
next subsequent round of financing.
For sure. I'm sure like a lot of the founders who are listening are probably asking, how do I get involved? Like, how am I going to be selected as like the next batch of founders to be on stage to at the demo day, as well as like, to be invested by 500 Global? How do you think about like from picking the startup perspective as an investor? Since I feel like 500 invests in startups when like they're at their like kind of infancy. You guys help them with like customer development and like finding product market fit. But I feel like at the very beginning a lot of the raw talents are probably sitting in like not very obvious spots. Like of course there's a lot of like founders I met from the last demo day. They came from like the Google of the worlds, but there's also founders that are like having really unique experiences. How should they kind of stand out when they didn't really have like the big logo or like the experience that kind of like looks really sexy on paper?
Yeah, and I guess so to start this off, I just also want to say that, we're
Mhm.
very fortunate to have helped accelerate some really fantastic headlining companies such as Solana and Shippo and
Mhm.
Talkdesk and Innovator
Mhm.
have come through the program in the past. And so in terms of selection, I mean, what we're looking for, we do spend a lot of time really evaluating the team.
Mhm.
We spend a lot of time trying to understand the why. Like, why, out
Mhm.
of all the things in the world, do you want to go out and you build this product or the service? And then what makes you qualified? What makes you uniquely qualified, you and your
Mhm.
team, to go out and build the most successful business here? I like to use analogies, kind of comparing the competition within the startup world to the competition within professional sports or within the Olympic arenas. It's fiercely competitive, and so
Mhm.
you have to demonstrate with your team that you have what it takes to, be the winner in a highly competitive space. I mean, each year there's hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of startups that are being launched, and we seem to think that there's going to be even more with kind of reduction of costs from everything from cloud service providers to just the increased productivity from different AI agents. Like there's just going to be more companies that are going to be launched, and so there's going to be certain founders that have really strong track record, like either for
Mhm.
their previous professional stop, like they've done a version of what they're trying to do now, and maybe they just got kind of pigeonholed or they got blocked for one reason or another. Maybe it was political, or maybe just they were not. It was too bureaucratic, and that now they're kind of taking their talents and they're kind of going out on their own as an independent. So there's kind of those category of founders, and if you've done if you do have that professional experience, we're going to be really kind of leaving no stones unturned. So we want to talk with people you previously worked with and previous managers, like to understand, like did you actually do the thing, or were you on the right team?
Mhm.
Like did you were you just on like a group project that got an A, or were you like the lead on that group that took that to the A, right? And so just trying to
Mhm.
understand what position did you play. But we are going to look for founders that have really strong domain expertise. And so, even
Mhm.
with this last batch, we had a founder building a really compelling financial service AI product.
Mhm.
And he formerly was the CEO of one of Canada's largest banks, their US business. He was the CEO of that. And so he has a lot of domain experience in the space that he's going after. We had another team that was at a huge call it um, fashion and textile manufacturing operation out of East Asia, and like they're building a generative AI fashion product now, and so like
Mhm.
they have a really strong story to tell. I'm like, why they are the right team to go out and build that product, and why right now is the right time for them to build that
Mhm.
product. But we also look for founders that maybe they don't have that same profile of experience, but they are really, really dedicated to understanding the psychology of their buyer better than anyone on the planet. And so we've had some founders in our most recent batches that have been more or less directly out of college, but if you talk to them and you see the amount of research that they've done about their buyer, it's clear that like they have just such a strong obsession for building a strong product or service in that space. And so we we want to see and understand and try to quantify the determinism
Mhm.
and the passion in the team. So the team is very important.
I'm taking notes. I wonder, so like I have like some consulting clients coming from the startup space. Like a lot of them are they are first time founders. Like they didn't really have a super solid track record. Obviously, I feel like what you just mentioned about like the psychology is very important, as well as like do they have like a domain expertise that like nobody else have in the world? Um I wonder, like a lot of the startup founder I spoke with, they're like more towards the earlier stage in their career. Like maybe they come from, let's say they work at like a Series B startup, and then they came out of there. They're very ambitious, very hungry, but on the other hand, like their lack of like industry knowledge, expertise, or their lack of like a differentiator, although maybe they are very passionate, they're very driven. You can see that like they're very tenacious people, but on the other hand, like there are kind of lack of like the industry knowledge piece, or like kind of like having a brand in a certain like universe. I wonder what's your advice for founders that are like trying to start something in the future, but right now it's like not necessarily having the right like expertise or profile right now on like how should they build up that like muscle before they enter the startup arena.
Sure. Yeah. So um, like many people have said this, I think it's
Mhm.
it's more or less kind of boilerplate, but one of the key advantages to startups, smaller
Mhm.
companies, is your agility and your speed, right? Over
Mhm.
incumbents, over a kind of like the status quo,
Mhm.
right? And so for those founders that you're describing, what they should do is they should demonstrate that they can become experts in that space
Mhm.
faster than maybe others have in the past. Like they
Mhm.
should dedicate themselves to figuring out how to gain that expertise. And so what that might look
Mhm,
like is maybe they go and they identify the right mentors, folks that have that track record, and folks that they can kind of, apprentice under, or they
mhm,
can just, have a monthly call with, or maybe every 2 weeks they can have a call with, so they can those brains, and they can
mhm,
level up their learnings. I mean, I think, also in this day and age of AI ascendancy, maybe some clever founders might just leverage LLMs to help themselves get
mhm,
to expertise level faster, right? Or other
mhm,
agentic experiences that are out there. But like, I think this is inherently a challenge for these types of founders, where it's like you have to prove it. You have to dedicate yourself.
mhm.
You have to like put in the hours. Malcolm Gladwell, 10,000 hours, right? Like you have to go out and do the work.
100%. I really like what you said about like, just like leveraging AI to educate yourself, or like, leaning on towards like a certain right mentors, and like kind of like build up that expertise as well as like the network for yourself. Speaking of build up the network for yourself, like, um before they, let's say, pitch to 500, like how should they even get the meetings from, like, let's call it like angel investors? Like how would you advise your portfolio startups to like reach out to other investors if they don't necessarily have like the strongest network in Silicon Valley?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. This is a game where like relationships really matter. And so, I
Mhm,
think so what we tell our companies, and what we tell our companies might differ slightly than what I tell companies that are not in the portfolio, but
mhm.
because the companies in our portfolio do have the 500 network
Like the
that
logo and
they can
like
lean
the
on.
yeah.
And many founders do. This is a good point that I should make, which is, many founders do want to join 500 Global because they know that we have a strong, thriving community of other company builders,
Mhm,
5,000 strong.
mhm,
And so it's almost a bit of an instant network that they're able to join. And we get a lot of founders that are coming from like outside of the U.S. They want to
mhm,
quickly get a Silicon Valley, network, and by joining our flagship accelerator, like that's one of the ways that helps them with that.
mhm,
But what I tell other founders in general is, and I have a slide for this actually in my I give an orientation
mhm,
slide to our new batches, but I kind of have a slide in the deck that I call kind of the hierarchy of introductions.
mhm,
And in that I'm trying to articulate that, like, there are going to be some certain people that can give you like kind of a better intro to your target than others, and you should be thoughtful about who you're
mhm,
asking for those intros. But I think for broadly speaking, founders should try to get connected with. Well, first off, they should do the work and they should research who would be the good angels for them to reach out to. So, like, who has the domain experience that they're looking for? I actually have a framework where I like to kind of think of your cap table through the lens of opportunity cost. And I like to use the term IVP, or I call ideal venture persona. Like, who's
mhm,
your ideal venture persona on your cap table? Like in terms of
mhm,
knowing your business, or who's strong in an area that you're weak. So maybe like
mhm,
you're all a very strong technical team, but like no one on your team has done any sales,
mhm,
right? Like you're completely
mhm,
deficient, and you're honest with yourselves enough to like realize that. And so now you're like, okay, well, I want to go find someone that's really gifted in sales, especially as it relates to a product on the kind of in my domain. And so go and find an angel investor that has worked as an executive in sales for like within a kind of a product space that is similar to what you're doing. And so get someone on the cap table that not only can provide capital, but they could also provide some guidance in terms of strengthening a muscle that either was non-existent or completely deficient. That's the way to do that. And so, like, first it starts with that research work and figuring out who the right targets are for the cap table. And then once you have that list, now trying to figure out, okay, who's connected to these folks. And so there's lots of different kind of databases that you can use, or just good old LinkedIn, to figure
mhm,
out like who are the common folks in your network, and then trying to
mhm,
figure out like who would most likely get me the most likely conversion rate, right? Because
mhm,
it's all a form of sales, right? Like, you're either going to be selling your end customer, you're going to be selling
mhm,
future employees, you're going to be selling investors, right? Like, you have to fundamentally develop some good sales
Motion. Yeah.
motion as a founder, regardless of what your background is. Um, but yeah, so like I would, then I would try to figure out, okay, who's gonna get me the highest conversion rate that I can ask for that intro, do a double opt-in intro. So you send
Mhm,
over some information describing what you're doing.
mhm,
Typically you want to go with maybe an intermediary that like has helped that angel either make money in the past, so maybe they were or another founder, or maybe like they were colleagues in the same
mhm,
product team or sales team or whatever, so that that would be kind of a very warm intro,
mhm,
which would give you kind of a higher probability that
mhm,
you would get that meeting, not 100% but a higher probability. But I also tell founders all the time, like, don't be afraid of cold inbounding. Like,
mhm,
there are some investors out there that will say, "Hey, it's a challenge to get to me. Like, I need to see how good you are
mhm.
at networking." But others are like, "Hey, if it's a compelling header, and like maybe you read my last blog post, you saw my last podcast, right? You're picking up on a conversation I've thrown out there within the interwebs. You're coming back to me with some insights or some,
Mhm.
you're seeing something from a different perspective. That's also a great way to start a conversation with a target."
I love this. Like, I wanna talk about the hierarchy of the messages, like, where it comes from. Like, so you mentioned, like, briefly about, like, maybe it's, like, whoever helped the angel made money in the past. Like, I really feel like a lot of the sales goes into research on, like, who have done what, and, like, a lot of the mistake I've seen founders made were like you're pitching a B2B SaaS investor to like a consumer company. That just I don't even know how many times that happens. Like, a lot of investors don't invest in hardware and then you're like hardcorely pitching your like robotic startups. Like I feel like a lot of the mistakes are like could be avoided by like just doing a simple Googling on
Yep.
like what this person does. And I also want to like I want to learn more about like who do you think besides like obviously the person who knows you the most and then knows me the most like connect us would be amazing, but on the other hand like most founders probably don't know a lot of people in Silicon Valley when they first arrive, and or maybe they're like just based off like a area that doesn't really have much of a robust ecosystem. um like I feel like it could be challenging to like getting a warm intro to someone who is like who helped the angel made money. Like that must be a really important person sometimes. If you're like not that if you're not like that connected to the or like not that plugged into the ecosystem, like what's your thought process on like getting plugged in? And like I would advise founders to like network with other founders as like,
Yep.
you're growing up with them instead of like just like, pitching the hottest investors. Like they typically probably won't take your meeting, but like if you're making some friends on your level, like it's a lot easier for you to like tap into your network later on when everybody become more successful. What's your thought process on like the hierarchy of like pitching who, and how do you navigate when you're like pitching to another founder about making an introduction to their investor, that kind of stuff?
Yeah. So a couple yeah, I think there's two big questions there. So the first one on just kind of founders I think need to realize that not all VCs are the same. I mean,
Yeah.
I think I wake up on a daily basis and I probably legitly have like 200 just kind of random
Yeah.
emails from founders that like they don't know what stage I invest in, they don't know what categories I like, but I can tell that I'm a part of some email campaign, and it just like kind of brute forces my inbox, right?
It's like
And
a
so,
high karma, comma, and then like the thing.
oh yeah, yeah, it's worse. Yeah, it's worse when like they haven't even kind of taken the time to personalize, and so you still
Yeah.
kind of see like kind of the markup on it. But um, anyway, so yeah, I think in today's day and age, there's far too many tools out there for you to not be informed as a founder.
Mhm,
And so like I mean, thinking about even kind of more broad general tools like Perplexity,
mhm,
to things like Crunchbase Pro, CB Insights, and PitchBook. Like there's just there's a lot of data sources, the NCBA. Like there's so many data sources out there where you can get a better understanding of like what these investors are looking for. And it's important to realize like that even within firms, there's going to be different teams within firms.
Mhm,
There might be a late stage and an early stage team, and they might kind of separate by verticals. And so, like,
mhm,
you got to really drill down to the right partner. It's not even just the right firm. It's like, who's the right person that like cares about your space. And usually, most investors do a great job today, like letting the internet know, like either via like podcast or blog post or Twitter or LinkedIn. They let folks know, what are they looking for. This is a matchmaking exercise. Like, you as a founder need to go and find the right investor, or if you have a lot of momentum, the right investor will definitely find you. And that's the name of the game. So like, on the first part, it's like doing that research, doing that time. It's important. Don't just like kind of do a brute force bulk, kind of
mhm,
send. Like, that's just
mhm,
not gonna get anybody's attention.
mhm,
Then,
for
the
sure.
second part of the question was on um I think you were uh actually, wait, refresh my memory on the second part. It was
So it's like if you have no network, how do you hit up the right
that's
people?
right.
Like, so yeah, it's not like you have to cold DM into the first person, or like, do you network with other founders? Like, who do you kind of network
So
to get
yeah,
that warm intro?
I would kind of categorize this almost as, kind of like, quote unquote, finding your tribe. So
Mhm,
like, there could be tribes like 500 global. There could be other types of, kind of accelerators, or tribes like that. But there's also tribes that can be defined as like kind of your vertical. So like, finding peers within your vertical. And so I've seen this work multiple times where I've had, like, let's say, a fintech company that's at the pre-seed.
mhm,
They will, start to network with um, fintech founders at the B, more so
mhm,
just to get feedback, right? Or like, because you're like, hey, you're working kind of on an adjacent product. We're not competitive. I figure, like, you've kind of had to go through some decisions that I'm about to embark on. I'd love to just pick your brain. You're not always going to get a bite back in those types of outreaches, but sometimes you will. And I've seen it work pretty effectively. And where, you as a pre-seed company going and talking to companies, founders that are kind of at the Series B or the Series C, we've actually internalized this type of notion as well, where we've matched. We kind of call it like big sibling, little sibling, where we kind of
mhm.
like match, some of our founders with founders that are a couple of stages ahead of them to get at where I'm going here. But nevertheless, let's get back to kind of the basic example where, if I'm fintech or digital health and I'm at the pre-seed, I would advise you to go after founders that are, kind of local to you, and wherever you are, let's just say the Bay Area, but also are within your vertical, but it's not competitive. And getting their feedback, getting their buy-in on what you're doing. And I've seen this work so effectively where I've had founders that have kind of won over cohorts of founders at that B or whatever that next stage is. And then those founders will speak highly to their seed stage investors on behalf of those founders, those pre-seed founders. Now, it won't always lead to a conversion in terms of a check, but it can lead to getting that introduction.
Mhm,
And it's good to get validation. It's good to get cosigns from other builders in your space, just
mhm.
anyway. But like, kind of the positive externality here could be getting that introduction to some of the investors that are within the network of those later stage founders.
I thought that was such a clever strategy to chat with, like, call it, like, like, bigger siblings in general, like, in the startup arena. Like, I wonder, like, so what is your first pitch should be looking like? I feel like I got a lot of deck without asking for it, but I would suggest, like, the founders that, like, are don't just immediately send on the deck, because that could, like, kill a lot of stuff, or, like, that could just, like, it definitely will help people understand if on your deck there's something that they recognize. Let's say their portfolio companies on your deck, or, like, some other really major factors, but, like, I wonder what's your suggestions on founders on, like, how do you pitch an investor? What should your elevator pitch look like? When do you start, like, getting the warm intro? And, like, how do you really get warm intro on a scale, like, because you could get some coffee chat from the series to be founders in your category, but like, if you're in a niche category, you call it like deep tech or something, there's like five founders that actually raise series B. Like, how do you, it's definitely more than five, but I'm just saying in general, like if you're in a niche category, how do you kind of like tap into that network and a skill, since I feel like investing or like raising funding is kind of like a numbers game. You need like 400 people in the pipeline to like close like five of them sometimes.
Yeah, I mean it is definitely a numbers game, and so like I think but I kind of want to go back to something I was alluding to earlier, which is fundraising is a sales process, and so
Mhm,
every founder should realize that, and get organized. And if you do want to have those warm intros at scale, it's all about getting everything in line so that you can get to that point. And so that's where I was talking about the research. So like, who are the
mhm,
right investors, like who, like for your vertical, for your stage, the size of checks that you're looking for, like who are the right investors, right? So first it starts there. And then the other part is more intrinsic. It's more about like, well, what's happening with the actual business. So
mhm,
are you at a position where you're showing that your core thesis is seeing some success, like you're seeing some proof? Like, are you having more design partners sign up? Are you converting more of those design partners from like a free or from a discounted
mhm,
kind of payment into like something that's more full freight? Like, is your ACV expanding? Like are there good meaningful updates? Are you winning more deals like in a competitive landscape, right?
mhm,
So if the business starts to show these strong performance indicators, that's a great time then to go out to market, right? Really, I almost think about it as like, you're launching a process, just like you're
mhm,
launching, a new version of your product or a new build of your product. And there's going to be
mhm,
a lot that goes into the prep work for that before it's actually time to hit, kind of the all go button.
mhm,
So yeah, so I would, tell the founders to spend time making sure that they have some marketable stats to celebrate as they get ready for that, their to kick off their process. Um, they have their targets aligned. If they have mentors or angels, or if they have advisors that are helping them with introductions,
mhm,
I would set a date. Like here's kind of like the go live date for our process. Here's like kind of the messaging I like you to send to the
mhm.
investors that are like we've targeted, that you said that are friendly with. And then when that date comes, it's kind of a coordinated kind of campaign where everything is kicked off.
I love that. I feel like it's so important to have like marketable stats. I always like find it's hard to like actually articulate what that is. But I feel like having marketable stats could go into like, what logo do you have on your deck, or like, who did you talk to that kind of like land, as you mentioned, design partner, like are they converting? Like what are some metrics that you're actually can like put on the deck? Um I mean then like
If
then
if I can follow, because you asked another important part to that question that came back to me, which is it's starting to be a little bit controversial. So the deck, to send the deck
yeah,
first or wait
deck
to the
or
first
no deck,
meeting,
yeah.
right? Yeah. And then also things that we've been seeing are, sometimes founders might build out a investment memo, so more of like a
Yeah.
PDF,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
like kind of
And then
in
the
lieu of sending the
newsletter,
deck.
wow, the update, that's crazy. I'm, like,
Yeah.
getting so many newsletter about people's update, like, it was super robust sometimes.
Yeah, well, so I mean, I think I really care about the definition of words. I
Mhm,
tell people all the time, like I probably would have, if I go back to college, I probably would have been a double major in linguistics because I care so much about definition. So what's happening with this process? Like with this process, you are looking for partnership. You are looking for basically silent
mhm.
partners in your business.
Yeah.
And as a good sign of partnership, I think you need to show them a little bit more under the hood. So I am a proponent for sending a version of the deck,
Mhm,
like in that early email, and it's fine if you put it behind a doc send. But I kind of think that like a deck is more or less like a business card, like it is
mhm,
a something, it's a document, it's a piece of information that helps the other side conceptualize who you are and what you do. And so I think it's fine to experiment with a deal memo because that kind of does the same thing. But like right now,
mhm,
like a deck is like more so, it's like the standard. And so like if you're going outside of that standard, an investor might say like, okay, well, why? Like, is there something that I should be concerned with here, or like, is this going to be a waste of my time? And so I do know that there's a lot of investors out there that like, you might be kind of DOA if you don't send that deck in that first email.
Mhm.
They might just say like, hey, I don't have time to play these games. So I do think like, it's fine to send over a deck. I kind of call it the way I position it is I say like I refer to it as a movie trailer. So send over a
Mhm.
movie trailer type of a deck. So if your main deck is, 20 slides or 25 slides, send over 10 slides, send over 7 slides. That just whet the appetite of that investor. So get them a little bit more engaged and up to speed on what you're doing so that you can have a more fruitful conversation if that investor does decide to open up their schedule to you.
I love that. I thought that was so clever to call it like a movie trailer. Um, what should be including in the deck? Like, so sometimes I got the deck, I'm like, "Oh, okay, this looks really sexy on the page 1, page 2," which is like, literally you guys have like the top angel investor on the little page. However, when it's coming to the product looks like, "What the hell is happening?" Like there was not much about the product itself. Like I know that people want to keep it a secret sometimes, like because you don't really know who is circling the deck. But on the other hand, I feel like I wonder like what should be even on the movie trailer deck? Like should like obviously you're gonna showcase your most like amazing features on there, but what does investor care versus like or like what is like I guess institutional investor care more than like an angel because I feel like you can totally close on certain angels when you have like the right logo, right person on the deck, like if that makes sense.
Well, yeah. There's lots in that question, Grace. And so, first off, I mean, you're right. Like different categories of players
Mhm,
might look for different things.
mhm,
So like, yeah, an angel investor, someone that more or less is kind of making the decision on their own,
mhm,
versus a VC firm and an
mhm,
institutional investor, where like typically there's going to be an investment committee. So
mhm,
there's going to be kind of a debate, a contentious process to get a yes. But even within VC, you have kind of more of the traditional seed stage players. So
mhm,
call it like folks that have a fund size of 100 million to 200 million, maybe a little bit bigger. But then you
mhm,
also now you have these like these platform VC, these mega funds that are multi-billion-dollar funds, and so like they're going to also be looking for different things because like
mhm,
they need different size outcomes
mhm,
to return their funds versus like a more traditional seed player with a 100 million to 200 million vehicle.
mhm,
So yes, like in the way that we coach it, we say like, hey, you might have different versions of your deck for the different
mhm,
audience because like you're gonna have different folks that care about different things. So that's also important. But what generally should you have in this deck? So this like in these teaser decks. Before I get on that, the other thing I would say is um, this also is a good forcing function for you as a founder to think about who do I really want to see my deck? Because if you're concerned that it's getting to the wrong eyes, maybe that means that you're adopting a strategy that's just like a bulk send. That's just like kind of a brute force, right? Like
mhm.
yeah, I mean I would be nervous about sending my deck out too if I just scraped a list from PitchBook on like all of the Silicon Valley based seed firms. Sure, like that is like kind of
Yo,
a
like,
very
I feel
very
like
risky.
yeah, imagine the signal, like, signal, like,
Yeah,
well, an FX signal, I feel like there's so many people probably just scraping that, like, and then sending.
exactly. And that's just because like so now then those VCs are gonna be like, okay, well, like if they're doing this for their fundraiser, are they doing this with their customer outreach? Is it gonna be sloppy, messy,
Mhm,
um, like low conversion rate? Like I don't know if I want to back them because like this is not indicative of just good kind of fundamentals, if you will.
mhm.
Right. And so
I
that's the other
I
thing.
would also argue, like but, like, if, let's say, you're not based in Silicon Valley, like, the 2 founders from your college actually have a startup, and then, like, where else would you go? Like, I mean, I would imagine the founder just go to Signal just because like, it is, like, a place that where I could find some VC's information. It's generally in the direction at where I wanna go. Like I feel like as a lot of people probably just do that because is out of frustration, right? Like, you probably don't have like 2,000 hours to research every freaking VC firm that's out there, like investing in everything. A lot of
Hey,
these mega
hey,
funds invest in everything right now.
well,
So,
but now we have AI. Now there's things that can help you reduce the time to do that research. But it is really important that you do that research. And so I'm definitely sympathetic. But like you're raising you're attempting to raise a lot of money, and you want to make sure. And part of the reason you're doing this research is because you want to make sure you get the right people on your cap table. There's also a
mhm,
lot of stories of of founders like optimizing for valuation or speed of deal, and getting not the greatest people on the cap table because they weren't that thoughtful on that. So
mhm,
so going to signal is not wrong in itself, but it's like, what do you do at that point in time, right? Like, do you
mhm,
scrape the entirety of that list? Do you try to like subcategorize, right? Like, and sometimes even just asking for help with like an intern,
mhm,
just cutting that list down will make just your process much more efficient
mhm,
than just trying to like spray it out to as many people as possible.
mhm,
But like going back to the core of the question on what should be on there. So like you got to do a good job of articulating what is the value proposition, what's the problem, how big is that problem, how big is the market, tam. We're in a day and age now where there's multiple companies that are valued over $1 trillion in the public markets. There's larger and larger valuations in certain aspects, in certain spaces like AI.
mhm.
And so I mean, you as a founder, you need to understand how is your market being graded from a TAM perspective.
How what do you
And
put on the TAM? Because like, if I'm creating an AI company that's helping, let's use Quill as example, right? Like, let's say, I'm gonna be like, the meeting notes app for everybody in the world. Like, the TAM is, like, humongous, right? Everybody send an email or, like, go on Zoom every day. Um, but, like, how do you really, like, write that page? Just because I kind of feel like it's tough from, like, do you do, like, bottom up, top down? Like, what do you think, like, universally people should be doing?
yeah, I mean, and this is, it's important to realize that, as a founder, this is another area that you'll be graded on, and
Mhm,
like it is, so I do believe that, excuse me, that the majority of early stage investors today want to see a bottoms up TAM analysis. So they want to understand, what
mhm,
does the population of buyers look like what is their economic condition,
mhm,
what is their disposable income, those types of things. And then they also want to understand what is the so I like to articulate it as like, think about it, TAM in one aspect as a snapshot. So what does it look like today? But then what's the moving picture? So like you want to have
mhm,
that CAGR. So what's the compound annual growth rate of this space expected to be?
mhm,
And just from a threshold perspective, I think that most investors today are looking for, at smallest, in the tens of billions of dollars. So if your market is under 10 billion
mhm,
and TAM, I think that it's going to be a little bit hard for you, but there might be an investor out there somewhere. But I think that most investors today, they're looking for things that are going to be in the tens of billions of dollars at the minimum. But really many will not get out of bed unless they can clearly understand that your TAM is 100 billion or greater. And they're gonna, it's not like they're gonna take whatever you have on that slide as the kind of the gospel truth. Like, they're gonna do their own analysis on it. They're gonna come back to you and say like, well, hey, I think that you're kind of you see this market as a premium, we have it as a
mhm,
discount, we'll meet somewhere in the middle, yada yada yada. But that is just the way to kind of think about TAM. But bottoms up, understand the population growth, understand like their willingness to pay, understanding their economic condition, position, as kind of tabulate what that TAM is. But I think gone are the days where you just search online, and whatever Google spits out from a McKinsey report, or kind of some consultant report in terms of like, hey, this is what your market is, and you just citing that report. Like, I think that those days are gone,
are
or
over.
greatly numbered. Yeah.
Okay. So basically we covered the deck part, and then what about the either investment memo or like a blurb. Like, a lot of people are like forwarding these blurb. Like, what should they even say in the blurb? Because sometimes the blurb are not blurbing. It's like this long. I'm like, that's what I say. I'm not forwarding this whole thing to my crowd.
Well, yeah. So also, just really quick on the deck, just to also just to reiterate, like team is also important. So like, what makes your team great, and that might be
Mhm,
like previous professional experience. That
mhm,
might be like something that you've done since getting together as a
mhm,
team. But like, you want to figure out a way. How do I articulate? How do I stand out as a
mhm,
team
mhm,
on my deck? That's also very important. And then on the blurb, I think so. I start off with um you as the sender, like put yourself in the position of the receiver. So like most likely this email is going to be received on a small screen on a phone. So
mhm,
you don't want it to read like a academic thesis,
mhm,
right? Like it's got to be punchy to the point. So I typically say like you want to have, maybe like 5 to 8 sentences that describe what the business does.
mhm,
Maybe you describe a little bit about the team, how you got together, then
mhm,
have a couple of bullet points that talk about some stats, like show that your
mhm,
thesis is starting to resonate with the buyer. So I would have that articulated in bullet points, and maybe I'd cap it off with
mhm.
that teaser deck, or maybe if you have notable advisors or angel investors, like also include that as well. Those could be positive proof points.
I love that. And like I wonder, so like I also felt like some of the founders are like writing the stuff like, they're like your BFF. So basically they would write like, like a lot of like super personalized stuff, like basically ask you to like confirm that like you are saying they're like an amazing company yourself. But on the other hand, like, you just met them from like an event or something. You want to help them, but you don't want to be like, oh wow, like that's like, that's untrue. Like, how do you like for founders, like how should they reach out like in like authentic authenticity, but also getting the warm intro, as like a lot of people are probably just really value on the warm part, but it's like I just met you, but I'm like not comfortable to say, hey, like I think this is the best company ever.
Well, so again, it comes back to relationship development. And so,
Mhm,
I think founders have to realize, like, kind of the position that they might be
mhm,
asking whoever is in the middle, right? Because, like, there is reputational risk
mhm,
at play here. And
mhm,
so, like, you as a founder, you also
mhm,
have to be able to read the room, and you have to be able to understand, like, you know, um, hey, maybe literally just met this person at a happy hour,
mhm,
it's about to be holiday party season coming up. So
mhm,
maybe at a holiday party, right? And
mhm,
they only know me kind of like, skin deep. They don't really truly understand.
mhm,
So maybe, and if they're kind of an important unlock for you, like it's between them. Like if you appease them, you can get into like whoever your dream investor might be. Then
mhm,
maybe it warrants like taking them out for a cup of coffee or for a lunch, or like getting some one-on-one time with them outside
mhm,
of however you originally met, so they could really truly see the depth of your thinking. They can understand, kind of the merits of your company a little bit
mhm,
better before you put them in that position to like just forward over something. Like they really understand a little bit more about who you are as an individual, the team that you put together,
mhm.
and the thesis that you're on a mission to build out.
Mm. Um, okay, another question is about like the elevator pitch. So like how do you build out like the quick 1 minute thing like that when you meet the right investor? What are you gonna say?
Well, so again, like, well, I think what's important here, and I remind a lot of founders over and over again, like this is an iterative process. Like you're not going to have a elevator pitch, a one liner, or even a pitch deck that like you feel like you can just set and forget. Like you're going to be
Mhm,
constantly updating this as you get more signal from the market, from different investors, from
mhm,
different advisors, from different founders. That will course correct you in terms of how are you articulating the problem that you're going after, the solution that you've built, and why you're the right team, and why this market really matters to venture investors. I think it's important to iterate on, to realize that this is an iterative
mhm,
process. But fundamentally, like you're trying to hit on a lot of the same points in terms of like why what I'm building matters. Like why, like out of all the things out there, like why is this important? So I think start by talking about the size of the problem, or if you know the person that you're trying to give this elevator pitch, if you have some existing knowledge on what they like or what they last invested in or some of their
Mhm,
talking points. If you could find that common ground, even better, right?
mhm,
Like that's a great way to start that conversation off, and then hit them with the boilerplate within your elevator pitch, which is like,
mhm,
why you're so passionate about this, like why
mhm,
does this space matter to a venture investor, and typically a venture investor is going to be thinking about the amount of money I can make in return
mhm,
after this making this investment. Is this going to be a fun returning opportunity for me, right? And so you want to hit on TAM, you want to hit on team, you want to hit on value proposition, problem, maybe not in that order, but some order
mhm,
of that in that elevator pitch to really compel that investor. Another way I like to think about elevator pitch, think about it as a hook, right? Like I'm trying
mhm,
to bait this investor into going from a 30-second conversation to a 30-minute conversation. So like,
mhm,
what do I need to say to like hook them in to compel them to
mhm.
give me a little bit more time?
Totally. I love that. I want to be mindful of the time. I don't want to like drag you into a 5-hour conversation. Although I feel like this is such a great like masterclass for founders who are like, especially the first time founders when they're like trying to outreach to investors, like trying to understand the market and everything. Um, I want to end with like a quick 1 minute fire round. Do we have do we have time for like one more question or no?
Yeah, I can keep going for a little
Okay.
bit longer.
Just one more question. It's like, how do you research the investor and the market too?
Well, yeah, I mean, I would say researching an investor. I think if it's any investor worth their grain of salt, like they
Mhm,
would on their firm website, they should
mhm,
have their portfolio. They should have
mhm,
maybe their own bio, and maybe on their bio page it also lists the companies that they personally were involved with within that firm. So that's where I would start. But then obviously things like LinkedIn and X, are other sources that I would go to. Crunchbase, CB Insights, PitchBook, or other repositories of information where I go to try to get more information, and then talk to other founders. And hopefully one of those sources I just mentioned would also discuss like other companies that might be portfolio companies of the firm that you're going after. With angels, it's a
mhm,
little bit harder to do this. AngelList used to be such a great repository for this data, but I think it
mhm,
no longer surfaces up some aspects of this. So maybe now that's kind of switched over to Signal. Maybe there's other repositories that are more helpful with like angels and scouts. But for firms, like I think that there's enough data sources out there for founders to be able to quickly piece together who are the right partners, what are the right firms for them to go after.
amazing. Okay, so 1 minute fire round. What's your favorite book?
That's a hard one. I would say like recently it's Sebastian Melody's Power Law.
Who would you invite to your dinner party?
Who would I invite to a dinner party? Alive or dead?
It's your party.
Well, come on, Steve Jobs, come on down.
Who made the biggest impact in your career?
Well, I mean, I've had like different like kind of story arcs within my career. So I'd say like on this recent story arc, I would have to say some of the leadership here at 500. So Christine Tsai, Dave McClure, and Monique Woodard.
Where can we find you outside work?
Outside of work, so I like to walk and I like to hike. So sometimes you'll see me walking around University Avenue in Palo Alto. Sometimes you'll see me walking around different neighborhoods in San Francisco or different neighborhoods in Oakland. But I definitely like to walk and do meetings, or just walk for exercise.
Last one. What's your favorite moment of like you joining 500 startups since it's been like 8 years?
Favorite moment. Oh man, this is also pretty hard. I would say like kind of a recent one. So my recent favorite moment is this last batch 35 was our first in-person batch since the pandemic.
Mhm,
So it felt so good. So that was like I think March of 2020 was the last time we had a group of
mhm,
founders together in one space. And that's one of
mhm,
our like kind of bread and butter. Like we
mhm,
we like to learn by osmosis. And so during the pandemic, we weren't able to work in person as much. We kind of got together still, but not as much. So this May of 2024 was so gratifying because we were able to get a batch back together in person, co-working in our office. And so I love that. And this batch has been fantastic to work with, and they're very friendly. The camaraderie is just spectacular with this group.
Amazing, Clayton. Thank you so much for coming to the show. It was such a fun chat and a super helpful lesson for everyone who's listening.
Thank you, Grace. I appreciate it. Good to see you. Glad we're
You
finally able
too.
to do this.
Thank you. Okay, let me quickly end stream.